ciudades de oro. Yo era una niña en aquella época, pero lo recuerdo con mucho cariño. Recuerdo que caminaba por las calles doradas.
The Golden Age? I was a young kid during those times, but I remember it fondly. I remember walking down the streets. The people were happy and proud. Our cities were full of life. Music could be heard frequently on the street corners. I recall how my father used to tell me we were the greatest nation in Terra, that we were the most advanced country, that we were doing things other countries could only dreamed of doing. We were so unafraid of the unknown, and that was our strength. Exploring the uncharted waters, building exquisite cities with our wealth. For me as a child, it was a golden time filled with warmth and pride. Every day I wished to hear those words from my father again. Yet, my reality is an unending gray since that day. I can only see that golden sunlight from my childhood in my dreams now.
The Golden Age of Iberia. It is something we hear so much about, yet when we are introduced to Iberia, it is a ghost of its former self. All we see are dead grey cities where the inhabitants live in fear and misery, where many are executed by the Inquisition, innocent or not, to keep the threat of the seaborne and the Church of the Deep under control as much as they can. But it wasn't always like this. Iberia, or formerly known as the Kingdom of Iberia, was a land ruled by kings, and not a church. It is safe to assume that while the Lateran religion was present and devoutly practiced, the Kingdom of Iberia was a more secular place than the current day Iberia. Many describing the old Iberia as a country often associated with passion, vitality, and indulgence. It is also said in the lore book that as time went on, with many years of exploring and amassing wealth, that kings started putting less emphasis on religion and more on the expansion of the country. While they may have been more secular, the Kingdom of Iberia was still a religious state with heavy ties to Laterano. The Sanctillanimum Ambrosi, the abbey we visit in Hortus de Escapismo, was a joint operation between Laterano and Iberia. The abbey was a place to study scripture, spread the Lateran religion, and teach soldiers from both natures on how to use explosives and firearms. So you can thank that abbey for passing down the training that would lead to our favorite four-head bird to have a gun. In the present day Iberia, most use rapiers as their weapon of choice, with very few being able to successfully learn how to use the handguns we see Irene use. The abbey was given to Iberia as a gift, and it too would be lost for 60 years due to the profound silence. Iberia had one big advantage over all other countries in Terra that led to their golden age: their political ties to Aegir. The Kingdom of Iberia would take in refugees from Aegir, those who were running from the seaborne threat. Most were scientists and researchers, which was a boon to Iberia. The most important refugee Iberia took in was an Aegirian named Breogan. Breogan was an Aegirian engineer who went to the royal court himself and told the court that he could help the kingdom operate advanced Aegirian technology and promised he'd further Iberia's own technology, which would lead to prosperous times for the country as a whole. The king accepted, of course. Under the leadership of Breogan, the Iberian Golden Age finally began. He helped them build massive nomadic cities on the coast, and with his team of engineers, he built the Eyes of Iberia. The star pod that envelops Terra made navigation via stars impossible, but with the Eyes of Iberia, that no longer was a problem. With the ability to explore, many Iberians set sail on the uncharted waters of Terra and brought back many riches to the country. During this time of exploration is when Bolivar was discovered and colonized, which brought even greater wealth to Iberia due to the large amounts of orogenium veins present. They brought back so many riches that eventually there was not enough space in the royal halls to store it all. The king at the time decided to set up viewing halls for the riches, both as a way to store their massive wealth and to show the citizenry their opulence. All of this is of course a parallel to our real world in the Age of Discovery, which were led by both the Spanish Empire and the Portuguese Empire. In Arknights, the Spanish and Portuguese empires are melded into one Iberia. This is just to further illustrate how far beyond Iberia was in wealth and in technological prowess compared to other Terran countries. During the Golden Age, the Iberian waterways were very advanced and made good use of the bountiful amounts of land they had under their control. They often would overproduce food and goods due to their highly advanced infrastructure, thanks to incorporating Aegirian technology. Not only that, but the Kingdom of Iberia also had the most advanced methods for fishing, fitting for a country bordering the ocean. They developed things like the fin catcher shawl, which were used by Iberian fishermen to blend into the coral reefs and hunt animals called giant fins. Later, this was taken by Rose Island and developed into optical camo, which is the relic we use in IS-3. Berogan helped the kingdom advance very quickly, so quickly that they far surpassed any other nation in Terra, yet he still had one fear. The same fear that made him flee his home of Aegir. Fearing a seaborne invasion, he enacted a plan to bolster the defenses of Iberia. He again presented himself before the royal court, seeking approval for building a grand naval fleet, a project that would combine the best land and sea had to offer. He of course got his approval, and thus the Great Armada was born. This included everyone's favorite ship, the Golden Stoltifera Navis. With their new fleet, they were even better at exploring and gaining wealth, and it cemented them as a superpower of Terra. They took part in many wars with a crushing victory over Victoria, and even were able to threaten the lands of arts, Lethania. The kingdom of Iberia seemed untouchable. However, not everything went according to plan. The titular Stoltifera Navis was meant to be Berogan's research ship, so he could better find a way to finally end the seaborne threat. Yet the greed for more power overcame the Iberian king. The Stoltifera Navis was turned into a war vessel against Berogan's wishes. In retaliation or defiance, Berogan decided to hide away his research on the ship, hoping for it to be found by people that would wish to end the seaborne threat, which would put the event 60 years later into motion. The king going against Berogan might seem out of character, but Iberia was enjoying a time of immense prosperity. Why would they be concerned over what lies in the ocean when they were the superpower on the land? Whether it was hubris or neglect on the side of the Iberian royal family, Berogan's fear of invasion would come true, as the shining light of Iberia's golden age would be soon snuffed out by the profound silence.
Estaba regresando a mi casa de un viaje de negocios fuera de la ciudad. Estaba en una colina.
I was returning home from a work trip outside of town. While I was on a hill on the outskirts of the city, I felt it was unnaturally quiet. The city also seemed to have noticed this unnatural feeling, as the whole city stood still to figure out where this feeling of wrongness was coming from. I finally realized what it was. It was the ocean. The ocean was quiet and unmoving. Then I saw the ocean recede and a massive wave start to form, heading towards our beautiful coast. As it got closer, it destroyed our eye. Seeing that, I felt an unimaginable dread. I watched as the massive wave crashed into my home, seemingly intent on drowning not the occupants but the city itself. As I was running to help my loved ones in the city, I saw them. Those hideous monsters that started to rise out from the ocean to swarm our coast, devouring everyone in sight. So I stopped and ran. I don't know what happened to my city after that. Maybe no one survived. Maybe those I left behind are fine. The Aegir knows. The Aegir knew. The Aegir are to blame for this.
The profound silence. This is the event that gave us modern day Iberia. The Iberia that is grey and slowly withering away. But how did we get there? The relic, King's Fellowship, gives us the answer. It was the Church of the Deep. The cultists of the deep did not achieve success overnight. They lingered at the junction between the land and sea for ages, preparing for the calamity that would come to be known as the Profound Silence. This cult is an Aegirian organization that wishes to fulfill the Seaborn's desire to assimilate the world. The cult members worship Leviathans. Leviathans are from where all the Seaborn originate. The church uses the heavy religious nature of the country to their advantage by incorporating twisted Lateran ideals into the religious teachings to better attract and convert Iberian citizens. Through this proselytization increasing their ranks, the church slowly planned with the Seaborn to invade the lands of Iberia. Then the day finally came. The sea went still before a giant tsunami rose from the ocean, destroying the eyes of Iberia, except one, and decimating most of the southern coastline. Many cities did not survive the initial tsunami, and those that did survive were cleaned up by the emerging Seaborn. The capital, Iberia, was a victim of this initial invasion. The capital lies underwater, never to be heard from again. The only thing we have left is the king of Iberia's last words that became known as the Silenced Edict. As the capital drowned, he said, "The light of the lighthouse is still bright. The Golden Fleet has set sail. The time full of hardships will soon pass, and our victory is not far ahead." At the dawn of this approaching victory, the oath between us is brighter than the stars, firmer than the earth, and more powerful than the ocean. In this extremely delicate period, we must have the same belief. Iberia will not fail. Iberia will win, and Iberia will remain immortal. Of course, this didn't come to pass, as the Seaborn shortly after would destroy the capital and cut communications off within the entire country. With communications shut down and the eyes of Iberia rendered inoperable, the entire Great Fleet of Iberia was lost to the seas of Terra. With the loss of the capital and the Great Armada, this marked the loss of power for the royal family and the rise to power for the Inquisition, turning the country of Iberia into a totalitarian theocracy. With the country drowning, the Inquisition used extreme measures to try to keep the Seaborn invasion in check. They implemented strict seafaring laws, used their standing as the church to legitimize their claim as a new governing body, and also used the devout nature of the citizens to discriminate against the Aegir populace, turning them to religious pariahs. The Inquisition would then kill many that were involved in the building of the lighthouses, and would further arrest and execute many more Aegir, whether they were innocent or not. The Inquisition would take charge for protecting the cities that were left and enact a policy of isolationism, closing the Iberian borders. But where was Breogan during all of this? The man that took Iberia to its golden age. Well, he felt that it was his fault, and it seemed that the citizenry agreed with him. In the Bloody Button description, it says, "Vicious rumors run rampant. It was the Aegir's fault. They were jealous of golden Iberia, and they invited calamity. And at the heart of the rumors was none other than he himself." Breogan is killed via lynching, enacted by both the Liberi and the Aegir alike. They all saw him as the one that invited such a calamity. The reason the relic, the portrait of Breogan, is a cursed relic in Eyes 3 is because the people of Iberia saw him as a curse that brought the end of their homeland. The lynching of Breogan would be the start of the persecution of Aegir that live within the borders of Iberia. Once the initial calamity fell upon Iberia, the country became silent due to the communications being blocked by the Seaborn and the Inquisition implementing isolationist policies. The profound silence's main path of destruction was on the southern half of Iberia. Many who survived were left wandering the wastelands where they headed north, hoping that it was in a better position. Thus, the once great country of Iberia fell into silent ruin.
Es una lucha solo para sobrevivir estos días. Todos los días son grises y algunos dependen de esos monstruos para comida. Incluso si eso significa...
These days, it's just a struggle to survive. Every day is gray, and some rely on those monsters for food, even if it means they might become one of them one day. Some have no choice. However, there have been rumors that an old ship from the Golden Age has been found. There have been some noticeable movements from the Inquisition towards the sea, and that has aroused some suspicion. It seems they haven't learned their lesson. All the other times we've tried to recapture the lighthouse. Fools. But it is better not to question what the Inquisition are doing. Better to not end up on their suspicion list, lest you want to disappear.
It's been 60 years since the profound silence, and Iberia has quietly fallen into ruin. Nowadays, many of the Iberian citizens are very distrustful of each other. Strangers that are able to bypass the blockade are met with eyes full of suspicion. This seems natural, of course, yet not even familiar faces bring comfort to the citizens of Iberia. Everyone is to be suspected in this lost country. Many of the coastline nomadic cities sit abandoned, and those that remain struggle every day to stay afloat. Those left in the cities remain forgotten and neglected. This is what we see in Salviento. Many are starving to death since growing food is incredibly difficult due to the fact that the Aegirian technology that was used to produce food was now lost. Thus, many have to resort to eating seaborn flesh to sustain themselves. This feasting on seaborn flesh to survive can be seen with the remaining crew of the Stultifera Navis. The consumption of seaborn flesh is, of course, also pushed by the Church of the Deep to assimilate as many people as they can. The Church of the Deep used starvation to more effectively recruit people into the cult. They promise food in exchange for joining the church and following their rituals. The ritual essentially involves choosing one of the Iberian citizens to be sacrificed to the Seaborn, with seaborn flesh appearing on the shore a day after the sacrifice. It is safe to assume that consumption of seaborn flesh is a regular occurrence in places that even the Inquisition have forgotten. In these last 60 years, the Iberian Church has remained as strict as ever, arresting and executing people if they are deemed to be affiliated with the cult. This ruthlessness turned out to be very effective, with a description of the relic, flamed with the Inquisition, stating that because the evil creatures were born from the sea, they were afraid of the flames that would never mix with the sea, alluding to the lantern that every Inquisitor carries. This fear of the fire is tragically seen with the sacrifice of Inquisitor Dario, who, despite being dead, frightened the Seaborn enough that they stayed outside the lighthouse of Gran Faro until his lantern died out. Speaking of the city of Gran Faro, 138 Iberians were arrested and executed for being suspected members of the cult by the Inquisition. Only about half were cult members. Profound silence seemingly has a semi-double meaning. The Inquisition seems to execute any outsider that comes to learn of the Seaborn invasion, thus keeping Iberia's problems silent to the outside world. Yet, why does anyone even listen to the Inquisition? Well, after the profound silence, they were the only institution that was actively trying to piece Iberia back together. They were the ones that took the lead to gather the people and protect them. So, despite their iron-fisted rule, the Inquisition still remains as the only governing force, and those that protect what is left of Iberia. This could explain the religious fanaticism that is seen. The church is the only light for the Iberian people. They are the only ones trying to bring back the country to its former glory and subdue the threat that brought their country's prosperity to ruin 60 years ago. The Iberian church is, quite literally, their only hope. To drive this point home a bit further, a quote from the lore book. The Lateran classics were based on laws and virtues, embellished with interesting anecdotes of saints, but the Iberian church rewrote them to become a guide for the life of the Iberian people after the disaster. In Gran Faro, the wish to bring back the Golden Age still exists, as it has the last functional eye of Iberia. This wish leads to many attempts to reclaim the lighthouse, but none were successful. All who went never returned. By chance, the flagship that represented the Golden Age, the Stoltifera Navis, reappeared after 60 long years of being lost at sea. If you remember what I said earlier in the video, the genius engineer Breogad hid away his research material on that ship, and this then becomes the impetus for both the Inquisition and Abyssal Hunters to work together to reclaim the last lighthouse and use it to locate the ship. Once aboard, our motley crew of characters are surprised to find how clean the Stoltifera Navis is, a far cry from the decaying cities it used to represent. This is due to the last two remaining crew members, Alfonso and Garcia, who are the only survivors. Many of the crew decided to end their own lives, many more were devoured by the Seaborn, and others were executed by Alfonso himself since they were turning into Seaborns. The ship is also still clean since the Seaborn have assimilated the ship to be included as part of their environment. After a long fight aboard the ship and against the Seaborn known as the Endspeaker, the Abyssal Hunters and Irene are able to retrieve Breogan's research and escape the ship before it sinks, due to the damage it has suffered during the fight against the Endspeaker. Alfonso and Garcia go down with the ship they have carried forward for the last 6 decades. Luckily, Jordi, by pure luck, is able to save both the Abyssal Hunters and Irene from drowning in the middle of the ocean. With their research collected, there is now hope that by using the research they collected, they might be able to finally bring an end to the Seaborn threat. Back home in Gran Faro, the Iberian people are also able to make progress to ending this age of silence, with all the remaining hidden cult members being killed, allowing for the Inquisition to fully reclaim the city. And these steps forward do mean something, since in the far future, the nation that was once silent will again travel the seas in search for a new golden age.
Mis padres solo hablaban de recuperar la edad de oro, esa época pasada que ellos recuerdan con tanto cariño, naciendo después.
My parents used to talk about bringing back the Golden Age, that bygone era they remember so fondly. Being born after the profound silence, I always thought it's pathetic that they could hold on so tightly to such an unreasonable dream, since all I knew were the permanent gray skies and this oppressive silence. But after the rumor started that the Stoltifera Navis, a ship from that bygone era, was found, I started to feel the same hope that my parents felt back then. This, of course, was quickly crushed when I heard more rumors that the ship had sunk, and just like that, any hope of a comeback was quickly raised and then dashed in an instant. But I came to understand why my parents held on to that hope for so long. I no longer see it as pathetic. It's a beautiful thing that they were able to hold on to such a bright dream amidst the silence.